Devil's Club has its own language, and you have to learn the language or the dialect of the plant in the area that it's growing. Respectful harvesting of our traditional foods and medicines is a very complex topic that should be discussed by many, many people, by many clans, and by many tribes, and should be an ongoing discussion for generations, and we are going to find that that discussion may change over time. It's always important before going out to harvest to know whose land you're harvesting on, where are you harvesting, what's been done to that land. So not even just, when you ask permission, people could tell you things like, ooh, don't harvest in that area because the old mining area used to be there. So maybe that area is now polluted. But what is the same is harvesting from a foundation of respect. And that is very important. And I believe that intention is everything when harvesting. In the Tlingit culture, reciprocity is very important. Therefore, there are people who will only harvest Devil's Club for their opposites and not themselves. If they're an eagle, they'll be harvesting for the ravens, and if they're ravens, they'll be harvesting for eagles. There are some people who will harvest specifically for themselves for a specific ailment without going out to get the opposite to harvest for them. And then there are people who maybe don't have access to their opposites to have them harvest for them, depending on which family they come from, because we've all experienced different stories of colonization and have different knowledge that's still strong in our family and maybe some knowledge that's been fractured. So for me, it's definitely about making sure that we come from a good foundation of positive intent when harvesting those things.
The purpose of this particular harvest is we're going to use part of it to protect the building, and we're going to put this bit over the doors, and that is used to help protect the building from evil spirits or bad spirits from coming in. And so we want to leave the thorns on for that purpose. Before we use any of this, we need to thank the plant. And so in order to do that, we thank it, but also just let it know that it's helping others. Kunaschish Tsacht Kwani Kunaschish Tsacht Kwani. We're not going to hurt you. We're just going to take a little bit so that you can help others. And so you're going to still keep growing. Kunaschish for allowing us to take a little bit of you today to protect others. Kunaschish. So after we thank the plant, it knows now that it's going to sacrifice a little bit of itself to help others. In doing that, we're going to take off the top green part. And we don't need this portion right now, so this is going to come off and just leave this in the forest. After that, we're going to come down about 10 inches or so, and we're going to snip off some of the thorns so that we have just a little bit of a handle to hold on to without the thorns, so that if we handle this without gloves, it gives us something to hang on to. Boy, I can really smell that Devil's Club. It has a super unique, distinctive smell. And just as I slice into the cambium, you can get that rich smell right away. Hits your nose. So as we take off some of that part, then I'm going to take the loppers snip off that part, and then there's the handle that we can use. And then eventually we're going to take this back and hang that up over the doors with all those spikes on it, and that's going to be the part that's going to protect the house, the building, and the people in it from the evil spirits. You should replace this from time to time. So if you put this up, it's kind of absorbs. So you can think of it kind of like the water absorbers in your car. You know, we live in a rainforest, so the water absorbers that pull in that moisture from the air. You don't necessarily see the moisture, but it's in the air, and it pulls it in. And eventually, you have to replace it and get a new one. And so similar to that, if you think of it that way, this is doing the same thing. We can't see the spirits. We know that they're there, and so it's pulling it into this, and so it can take so much of it. And then so after a certain point, you have to take it out and replace it with another piece. Similar like in my car in the rainy season, when it gets full of water, that we got to replace it. So that's kind of an analogy, I guess you can think of the way that this works out. So, Gunnar Cheese sagt.
Cheese. We ask that all the bad things trapped in here go out into the sea, and it doesn't bother us and touch us anymore.
In the wintertime, we get a lot of snow, and when the snow starts to melt into the springtime, that feeds the root system, and the roots wake up. And that's the best time to harvest root. And then as spring progresses, you'll start to see the leaves pop up throughout the plant and then start to grow up to the top at the beginning of summer. And that's when you know that the medicine is going up the stalk, and it's a great time to start harvesting the stalk. And for a lot of plants, when they begin to fruit or seed is the time that they need to proliferate, and so that's oftentimes the time that I will stop to harvest. When we read about the harvesting of Devil's Club, quite often you're going to read where people say that the strongest medicine is in the roots. So we have a lot of people who are going out now and only harvesting the roots. And that is not, in my eyes, respectful harvesting, because not everybody needs the strongest medicine. If people are using the medicine for just some aches and pains and cuts and scrapes, then it's completely okay to harvest the stalk.
And then this part is the Cambrian level, and you can kind of see it's just the outer green part. So what we're going to do is going to scrape it off, and this is the part that people tend to be allergic to. So if you are, don't do this part. And the idea is you kind of want to find like a little place in the woods, because these barbs, you want to keep it away. And you'll find a tool and you'll just scrape it until you get to that green part. And it should just slice right to this inner layer. And I think we're at a good stage right now, which we were described as butter, hopefully. Yes. And it just peels right off like that.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's like snakeskin, and then we just hang this in dry. After all this dries, people will put it in like a coffee grinder and get it into a powder, and that's what you use to infuse with the oil to make the salve. Or you can just cut it into strips, and then you can use that for tea.
You got a piece.
Yeah, there we go.
Awesome, really good.
Yeah. And so we had some hang in our house, and our whole house smelled like I'm sure your
Yes.
house
Oh
did
my
too.
Gosh.
And then you just let this out to dry, and then you guys can try squishing this inside part, and this is where like the holes poke through when you try to make beads.
It's a really lightweight, sappy plant once it's dried.
Respectful harvesting varies greatly between individuals and clans, tribes, and villages. What I have found over the years as Indigenous people, a lot of the foundation of our ways of being around respectful harvesting come directly from our family and friends. Therefore, if we get new information that conflicts with that, sometimes we feel offended. So what I try to do is to not be offended when I learn new information about the way maybe a different clan will harvest, or a different family, or a different tribe. So as a Tlingit person, I definitely had a very set idea of what was considered respectful harvesting for something like Devil's Club. I want to make sure that, one, people are not going to be consuming products that hurt them. You know, it's something that affects your blood sugar, it affects your heart. You know, if people are making Devil's Club ice cream or Devil's Club kombucha, they should be putting warning labels next to their product that says if you're taking heart medication or insulin, you should know that this may affect you. Your average visitor that comes off the ship isn't going to know about Devil's Club and isn't going to know that it affects them, even if there is a large amount of local people that know. So it's important to have that kind of warning label next to the product if they're going to do that. Devil's Club is an exceptionally complicated plant, and it takes decades, really, a lifelong journey of learning it. And if you just go out to a blog and read a few things and go out to harvest, you definitely do not know enough about Devil's Club to be able to call yourself an expert. It's something that when people learn from me, I always ask them to go learn from a handful of other people and then incorporate what they've learned from those numerous people for themselves and what works for them.
Indigenous peoples are ever mindful of the inherent value in tsacht, or Devil's Club. Cultural protocols exist to honor and to protect this sacred plant. Sealaska Heritage Institute encourages you to leaf harvesting to experienced individuals in respect for these time-honored gathering traditions.